Hello everybody, welcome back to Fanblade. Well, I have got a clear bench and we've got a clear run at a new project. I'm building an electric upright bass. Mainly because I've never done it before and this could get really interesting. I'll give you a bit of the backstory, but I'll try and keep it short. When I left high school, I went to the local polytech, and for my American viewers, that's somewhere between a college and a university. This sort of it covers the middle ground, but it's a tertiary education institution. Anyway, they had a 3-year diploma in jazz studies, so I went and did that. That was a couple of decades and counting ago, and I've kind of forgotten a lot of what I learned, because having left that course I immediately joined a rock covers band and pretty much never played jazz again. So there are skills that I learnt which lay dormant for years and now they've pretty much disappeared. So I've just enrolled in a different college's jazz course for 1 year and I am going to get my skills back up to speed on the upright bass. Except I don't have one, so here we are. Now, I've been to see a friend of mine who has a very nice upright bass, a proper acoustic double bass, and I've took extensive photos and, I say extensive measurements. Hopefully, I've got enough information here that I can do a design that's actually going to work. Then, when I know what it is that I'm actually building, I'll probably, consult with my friend about what he thinks of it. And then figure out what I'm going to build it out of, because just over there behind the camera there's an enormous amount of wood. I've no idea if any of it's big enough. I suppose we'll find out when I figure out exactly how big it all has to be. So yes, I've cleared the bench back, because this is going to be a large thing, and if I'm going to draw it out full scale, then I'm going to need quite a bit of room. Okay, so I have the paper perfectly parallel to the edge of the bench, which means I can just run my square down and get nice parallel lines. I can use the edge of the paper as a reference if I have to. I'm going to have to actually draw this out twice. I'm going to have to draw the front view there, then transfer all the relevant measurements down here so that I can draw the side elevation. This thing is going to have angles in it that I've never tried to draw before. It's like the headstock design alone is completely different to anything that I've ever tried to make. So I'm going to have as detailed a drawing as possible, and then hopefully I'll have some idea of what I'm doing, because right now, I got nothing. Right, so that's got the all-important centre line. The strings laid out, it's a 40mm nut, and it's a 78mm, or that is to say 26mm per string. Yeah, this is very different to anything I've ever drawn out before. I'm going to have a think now, because, and I don't know if I want to go for, sometimes you see a bit of a body shape on these things. I quite like the Warwick Triumph basses, the sort of the triangular shaped ones. And of course, being me, of course I want it to be a violin bass shape. Just don't quite know how practical it's going to be or if it's going to look any good, because it might look really nice. Don't know how it's going to look with a giant neck sticking out of it like that. It might look a little bit strange, so... And that is a kind of one of the problems with electric upright basses, that if you try and get all arty and weird with them, all you wind up with is weird. And I don't want weird, I want practical. And elegant, if I can pull that off. Okay, I've had a few days tinkering with this now and just thinking about the design and just sort of tweaking it till I figure out basically how I want it to go. When I measured my friend's base, he had the angle over the bridge was 150 degrees over there. Depending on where you measure it from, I think it would be that angle there is 150. That's like I've drawn that in there and sort of worked out the geometry of where the body sort of sits on that angle. It's like, I don't know. That looks a bit extreme to me. Also, I'm going to do a traditional style bridge, only sort of shrunk down a bit because we've only got that much room to play with. I did think about putting, or sort of having the body come in relatively flat and just putting a sort of a standard kind of a bridge on there, only maybe longer grub screws in there just to account for the radius. But then I thought, well, a lot of the tone of an upright base is coming from the fact that the bridge is made of wood. I really do need to make a wooden bridge sort of in this design, which will sort of come up about there. Anyway, the point is the angle doesn't actually matter all that much because I'm making my own bridge. I don't have to angle this to any particular bridge that I have or that I've bought. You know, I can tailor that to suit basically any angle I want. Yes. Now, as for what I'm building it out of, I've got an awful amount of quilla. That's a neck. And that's a body. I nearly, almost had enough to be able to make the entire thing out of this piece by itself, but it's just a little bit too short to get a second, because I'm going to have to sandwich 2 layers of this for the body. I couldn't get the body and still have enough length for the neck, so I had to go buy some more. These have come... Oh! That was a bridge. These have come from a recycled timber place. I believe they have been oiled, or at some point they've got a little bit damp and some of the natural oil in the wood has come to the top. So they will need to be thoroughly cleaned before I can glue them. Yeah, they've been cut. Like I say, it's recycled timber. All of them are cut on an angle down there. So they'll all need to be levelled and squared. But I'm actually very happy to have found these, because there's a problem with the headstock, which I can solve with these pieces. Now, the problem with using that big plank for the body and the neck as well is that if I were to re-saw it and flip it on its edge and re-glue it, then I have to make a choice. I could either have one up the centre and then another 2 each side, so I'd actually need 5 slices. There just isn't enough of that wood to do it. The only way I could do it would be to use 4 slices, and that means that I have a glue join running right down the centre line. I don't love that idea. Also, if I've got a glue join running down the centre line, and I've got one piece of wood that is 22mm right to this point here, then I've got a glue join right through the weakest part of the headstock. I don't like that. I think that's a really, really bad idea. So, having got these pieces here, by the time I square them off and everything, this will be 30mm across there. One straight up the centre comes to... Where does it come to? If the centre line is sitting on 15, and so the second piece of wood starts pretty much there, but then all of this entire thing, that entire side can be one piece of wood, which means it's solid through the weak bits. So structural integrity. I'm even considering laminating the front and back of this just for strength, because especially this area up here, you'll notice there's a certain amount of thickness there, and it's way thicker there. That's because we're going to have end grain running all the way up there, and it's weak. It can break. And there's a lot of tension in this area. You've got to strengthen them. So paying careful attention to detail on this one, because the last thing I need is to be on stage and have the thing disintegrate on me. I think that would be a kind of a bad look. Anyway, I think there's basically nothing left to do now except start doing some woodwork. I've got to square these up and glue them together, take a couple of slices off the body and glue them together. Yeah, let's get messy. here we have the body. That's not going to be difficult woodwork. Cut it to shape. Neck cavity, control cavity on the top edge there, so the controls are accessible while I'm playing. There's nothing groundbreakingly difficult about this, so we'll just park that for the time being. The neck, however, is a different story. There's going to be a lot going on here, and because this basically is the instrument, effectively. This is where you're playing the notes. This is where the pitch of the notes is decided. The neck is the instrument, essentially. I need to decide whether or not I'm going to put a truss rod, or what sort of truss rod I'm going to put in here. Now, I've been through the bin and I just don't have anything that's long enough. It's all just ridiculous, so I would have to make from scratch a single action truss rod. Now that requires a scooped channel and then a fillet that goes in there. You put a brace at each end, nut on the top. Doesn't sound difficult, but it does have to be very precise, because you are preloading the truss rod to automatically pull back. What I want to see is whether or not this will actually work without a truss rod. Now, obviously that's an insane thing to try. I have consulted an expert. We have a luthier named Peter Stephen who lives locally to me, and he's got an enormous amount of experience and technical skill. I mean, he builds acoustic double basses for a living. And you don't argue with a man who builds acoustic double basses for a living. What you do is you find out what he's got to say and you agree with him. What happens with an acoustic double bass is that the neck is actually very, very short. Comparatively speaking, they're actually not that long. And the amount of string tension that's acting across that short distance isn't enough to shift the neck. Double basses don't have truss rods. The fingerboard continues far beyond the neck, and to get some relief in the neck, you plane the relief in. You scoop the neck. That's... and I should say, Peter was very informative. He said that it's actually a different amount of scoop for classical double bassists versus jazz double bassists. He also said that the headstock isn't called a headstock. It's called a peg box. I'm learning heaps here. This is great. So I'm going to take his advice. We sort of come to the conclusion that it would probably be okay. If it's not, then my options are to remove the fingerboard and stick a truss rod in, or just treat this entire thing as a prototype, and if it doesn't work, I'll just build a better one. Because by the time I get to the end of this, I'll have learned so much about bridges and peg box... still seems weird to say it, peg box shapes, and I'll figure out if I even like how this body looks when it's cut to shape. I'm going to try it without a truss rod. If it doesn't work, then that'll go on the list of things that I improve in the next iteration of this instrument. So for now, just to move forward without having to do a lot of dicking around with scooped channels and fillets and anything else, I'm just going to put a fingerboard on. It's the path of least resistance. Let's walk it. Here is a neck blank, nicely flattened, ready for its fingerboard. Here is the fingerboard that I cut, or here is the piece of wood that I split in two for the fingerboard. You can see exactly what's happened to there. We've got some bowing happening. I mean, ordinarily that would be game over for this bit of wood. I'd simply set it aside and, I don't know, use it for clamping cowls or firewood or something. But I'm actually going to use this, because everything that I was saying about preloading some relief into the neck with the single action truss rod, I'm going to do it with the fingerboard instead. If I glue that on there, then that's going to give this neck a little more spring back against the string tension, and I think that's going to serve me well. It's not a whole lot, it might be just enough. Time will tell. There's a couple of little problems. There's a weird little bark inclusion there. I'll chop that off. I've got plenty of length to play with. There's also a couple of knots just in the center block of this one, but again, I've sort of measured this up. that when we cut the hole out of the centre of the peg box, I'll just cut those right out. They're not even going to be a part of the instrument. So this is all fine. It's all going according to plan. What little plan there was. Okay, fingerboard's on, and it is extremely stiff. I can't even... maybe just getting a tiny little bit of flex out of that, but I mean, there's... I could probably stand on this and it would be absolutely fine. Hold that thought. Right, I'll need to look at the video to see exactly how much flex that had, but it didn't feel like there was very much at all. And granted, we're going to have to remove quite a bit of material off this. That will give it slightly more flex, but I'm not a light person. The amount of string tension that's on this is not even going to be close to what we just subjected this to, so I think we're going to be fine. Speaking of cutting out the neck, yes, it's time to cut out the neck, except for one little thing. I want to drill the tuning posts through before, because the design on there is the sides are going at a very slight angle, and I actually want to drill them through straight. So while these are nice flat edges, I'm going to drill through, but I've made a little bit of a design decision regarding the actual tuning pegs. So there are two problems with using these tuners. First off, this plate here, this backing plate, is exactly the same width as this piece of wood currently is, and I need to remove a little bit more material to clean up the back face. This has wound up being too small to fit those on there without having some overlap front and back. I don't love that idea. I could veneer front and back to give myself a little bit more width, a little bit more strength, but there's actually a second problem which is not so easy to fix, and that is the fact that this is a 12mm shaft drilled in from that side, and then I would need to drill I think it's a 15.5mm hole in from that side. That's almost impossible I just don't have a tool that will get in there and drill an accurate hole in such a confined space. So, two problems, one solution: smaller tuners. I can drill a 13.5mm hole all the way through, get them all nicely lined up, and then I can pretty much cut the neck out. At that point, we're ready to start shaping it. So, that's where we're at. 13.5mm holes, and a bit of fun on the bandsaw. here is the neck, cut to shape, and pretty much damn near perfect if I'm sort of carefully place that there. Pretty much lines up exactly with the pattern, so this is good. I've sanded out most of the saw marks. There's still a few, but I'm just going to carve those away when I carve the neck, which will be happening in the next video, as well as basically just neck pocket, make a pickup and a bridge. Then I can string it up and see if this is going to be a viable neck. Yeah, there's not that much to this. This is actually pretty simple. I thought it was going to be complicated. It's actually coming together in record time, which is good because I actually need this as soon as possible because classes start next week. So, yes, thank you all for watching. Thank you very much for subscribing. Make sure you come back and watch part 2 because that will be kind of cool. And I'll see you then. Cheers. Bye.